First reading. A reading from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verses 9 to 10 and 13 to 14. While I was watching, thrones were set in place, and one most venerable took his seat. His robe was white as snow, the hair of his head as pure as wool. His throne was a blaze of flames, its wheels were a burning fire. A stream of fire poured out, issuing from his presence. A thousand waited on him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was in session, and the books lay open. I was gazing into the visions of the night, when I saw, coming on the clouds of heaven, as it were a Son of Man, he came to the One most venerable, and was led into his presence. On him was conferred rule, honor, and kingship, and all peoples, nations, and languages became his servants. His rule is an everlasting rule which will never pass away, and his kingship will never come to an end. This is the word of Lord. Thanks be to God. Second reading. A reading from the second letter of Peter, chapter 1, verses 16 to 19. When we told you about the power and the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, we were not slavishly repeating cleverly invented myth. No, we had seen his majesty with our own eyes. He was honored and glorified by God the Father. When a voice came to him from the transcendent glory, "This is my Son, the Beloved. He enjoys my favor." We ourselves heard this voice from heaven when we were with him on the holy mountain. So we have confirmation of the words of the prophets, and you will be right to pay attention to it as to a lamp for lighting a way through the dark until the dawn comes and the morning star rises in your minds. This is the word of Lord. Thanks be to God. A reading from the Gospel according to Saint Matthew, chapter 17, verses 1 to 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There, in their presence, he was transfigured. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as dazzling as light. And suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared to them. They were talking with him. Then Peter spoke to Jesus. "Lord," he said, "it is wonderful for us to be here. If you want me to, I will make 3 shelters here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when suddenly a bright cloud covered them with shadow. And suddenly from the cloud there came a voice which said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. He enjoys my favor. Listen to him." When they heard this, the disciples fell on their faces, overcome with fear. But Jesus came up and touched them, saying, "Stand up, do not be afraid." And when they raised their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus. As they came down from the mountain, Jesus gave them this order: "Tell no one about this vision until the Son of Man has risen from the dead." This is the word of Lord. Thanks be to God.